I thank you for coming this evening, and I believe, Mr. Whitney, are you to make an announcement here? Are we going to do that, Board, or should I? All right, very well. I've never turned down the bully pulpit yet. My friends, we encourage you to ask questions this evening. Who makes history? Who makes history? What did I? People. Are we not people, the four of us? So ask questions about our life. You know, besides just the presidency. We all had interesting lives, and we're more than pleased to share it with you. I want you to conduct yourself during this question and answer period as you would conduct yourself in a football game. In other words, don't flinch, don't foul, but hit the line hard. Promise me that? Thank you.
Thank you very much for very insightful and entertaining glimpses into your lives. Now, we do encourage you to ask questions, and we have microphones at the end of this aisle, and also for those of you up in the balcony, right in the middle. So as you queue up, please do so now, and we will alternate among the microphones. And while you are queuing up, I would like to ask the first question of each of you gentlemen. Would you please tell the audience, what you regard as your greatest achievement?
You said you had fun during the presidency?
Only good fun, sir. Well, life is a great adventure.
Very different presidencies. Forgive me, sir. I would tell you that the thing that I am most prideful of, and I try not to be prideful, but it may surprise you. It has nothing to do with my public service. It has to do with my home. There is nothing that I hold with greater esteem or more pride than my beloved Mount Vernon. It is the only place I have ever wanted to be, sitting under my own vine and my own fig tree. But alas, in my life, all roads lead away from Mount Vernon. I have found that I have been repeatedly faced with the choice between inclination and duty, and of course, I have always answered the call of duty. But surprisingly, sir, it is Mount Vernon. Mr. Jefferson.
I would concur with His Excellency. And for me, I hope all my days will end where I assure you my wishes do, at Monticello. No other place, in my experience, can take the place of my native woods and fields. And yet, I would say, Mr. Whitney, my greatest achievement without question has been acquiring the hand of Mrs. Jefferson in marriage. No, I can assure you this, I've always believed harmony in the marriage state is the first chapter in the Book of Wisdom. And it is certainly achieved when two individuals make it their personal duty to make the other happy. What a very simple formula for universal happiness and harmony within the marriage state. I will never forget when I first set eyes on the slender form, the gracious persona of Miss Martha Wales there when I entered Williamsburg City that winter of 1759 and 1760, and yet I discovered within a short time she was already spoken for by a classmate of mine at William and Mary, Mr. Bathurst Skelton, and yes, when Bat left the college they were married. But 2 years later, Bat died quite suddenly in a carriage accident out on the road to Jamestown, and the widow Skelton then went into her seclusion for about a year. I will never forget, nearly a year later, I was riding down the Duke of Gloucester Street. I heard the most melodious sound of a spinet coming out of a parlor window in the distance. Well, I recognized the melody. In fact, so did my horse. He took me swiftly in that direction. And when we arrived, I dismounted and went up onto the porch, and there was the graceful form of the widow Skelton seated at the spinet. I knew then she must be coming out of her seclusion. So I made a rap on the door. The servant girl attended. I inquired of her whether the widow Skelton would enjoy Mr. Jefferson to accompany her on his violin. She went in and returned to the affirmative. She would be delighted, sir. And thereby I engaged nearly an hour's musicale with the widow Skelton. And as I took my leave, the very same servant girl, upon handing me my hat, said, "Mr. Jefferson, you might be the further delighted to know that during your musicale I observed two gentlemen approaching in this direction, though still at a distance. You desisted in your accompaniment at that moment. The widow proceeded in her solo. I saw the oddest thing. The ears of these gentlemen horses perked up and took them swiftly in this direction. And when they arrived, both of them jumped off the horses, ran up onto the porch, ready to knock on the door at the same time, when it was then the music of your violin was heard co-joined with the music of the spinet. And I distinctly saw the one gentleman look to the other in disgust as he lowered his hand and said, "But too late, Jefferson's gotten here before us." It is a true story that I'm delighted to share with you, and yet I lament to inform you that as Mrs. Jefferson bore us 6 children, she found childbirth to be of a great labor. We could never understand why in childbirth she craved sugar more than usual, why our babies weighed the heavier consecutively, one after the other, to the extent our last child, a little girl, Lucy Elizabeth, weighed 12 pounds at birth. Mrs. Jefferson did not survive, but not before. I promised her on her deathbed I would never marry again. And I continued, as you know, to uphold that promise. No, I have often said at that moment I lost my dearest companion, that the future could not possibly hold any further happiness for me, and that no man could have experienced but 10 short years of uncheckered happiness. That is my greatest achievement, sir, even in its sorrow.
Fond as I am of the White House, and though I've much appreciated my years in it, there isn't any place in the world like home, like Sagamore Hill. There can be no more healthier or pleasanter place in which to bring up small children than that nook of old-time America that lies around Sagamore. My friends, there are a great many successes, achievements, and attainments to gather during one's lifetime. It's exceedingly interesting to be a successful businessman, a railroad man, a factory man, a lumberman, a rancher, a hunter of grizzly bears or lions, a colonel of a fighting regiment, president of the United States. But if things go reasonably well, a household full of children make all other successes and achievements and attainments lose their importance by comparison.
Well, I may be put on the spot here because I could talk about my family, my 4 boys. 2 of them died before they were 11. 3 of them died before they were 17, and Mrs. Lincoln was left with a situation where she was emotionally distressed. I had inscribed upon her wedding ring, "Love is eternal." And that was true. That was true in my feeling of her. But I suppose if I could get away from that family line just ever so briefly, I would say that what brought me the real happiness was keeping this great country together. And if you have to put it in an A-B situation, while I'll be remembered for the Emancipation Proclamation, that never would have happened had we not kept the nation together. So always place them A and B, keeping the Union together and giving a race of people freedom.